It's the politics. And, he's a politician. That is literally what he's hired to do, is to get the politics of international relations right. What he should have been able to say was that the United States was free to use their bases. After all, they have a perfectly respectable position that this is self-defence, but that doesn't mean that it's wise for the United Kingdom to be involved.
Meanwhile, Aisha Hazarika is here with Times Radio Drive from 4 p.m. this afternoon. Yesterday, she interviewed the now politically unaffiliated Baroness Varsi, former chair of the Conservative Party, about whether the UK should be involved in the attack on Iran.
Listen, far be it from me to be sat here praising a Labour Prime Minister, but I am so relieved that we have a Labour Prime Minister in charge at the moment, and that some of the nonsense and rhetoric we're hearing from other quarters is not what is running our country. Because it is neither legal nor right, nor in our interests for us to be doing anything but what we are doing at the moment, which is providing defensive support for our allies, which is completely the right thing to do, but also making it clear that this is not our war and this is not something that we should be engaging in.
Yeah, Baroness Varsi there, and you can join Aisha again from 4 p.m. this afternoon on Times Radio. Now, staying with Iran, there are reports that the USA and Israel might soon run out of the hugely expensive ordnance they are flinging at the country, but then also reports that Iran itself has seen its military forces irreparably degraded. You would think that affluence and hardware would determine the course of this conflict, but, like Ukraine, Iran is hitting back with very cheap but reasonably effective drones. Joining me is Tom Tugendhat, the former Security Minister, who has served in Iraq and Afghanistan with the British Army. Tom, a real pleasure to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. Whose weaponry is going to be degraded first, Tom?
Well,
hello, Tom.
It depends on supply chains. I mean, this is where, forgive me. Hello?
Yep, you're there. Hearing you fine. Yes,
Sorry.
Fine.
Forgive me. It's all reminding me of Omar Bradley's famous line, the Second World War American general, who said, amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics. And here what we're looking at is a real challenge of both supply and manufacturing. The Iranians are making an extraordinary number of very cheap drones, or rather have made an extraordinary number of very cheap drones, one of which, Shahid 136, I brought to Parliament a few months ago to put on display, one that had been sold to the Russians and fired at the Ukrainians, but very much the same design. And of course, the Americans, on the American side, they're firing up, huge amounts of weaponry. And then, of course, the third element is those who are defending themselves. The United Arab Emirates have fired out enormous amounts of munitions to try and stop the hundreds of drones that have been coming towards them. So you're right, there is a logistical problem. And a lot of people are racing to supply the Emiratis and the Kuwaitis and so on, while the Iranians are firing so much.
And how do you see it progressing then? What do you think is going to happen next? Donald Trump initially said this is going to be over very quickly. Then he said 4 weeks. Now he's saying 4 or 5 weeks. Could you see this stretching?
Well, I'm afraid until I know what the aim of the US and Israeli governments are, it's very difficult to give you an answer. And I've heard various different conflicting messages, including most recently the President of the United States saying he wanted to choose the next leader of Iran. Well, that's a big ask. He may, of course, have a veto in the sense that he could assassinate whoever comes next. But actually choosing is a really difficult thing to do. So, until I've heard a proper strategy out of the United States, it's very difficult to give you an answer.
So is it probably the case that, as Baroness Varsi was speaking earlier there, that we are probably under Sir Keir Starmer doing the right thing in keeping our distance from the direct attacks on Iran and only helping with the defence of, for example, Kuwait, Cyprus and so on?
Well, I think it's certainly essential that we help supporting our allies and our friends in the region. And that's why I was so disappointed that, given all the tensions arising, we found ourselves without a warship in the Gulf or the Mediterranean. Frankly, I know it's going to take a while to get the boat there. Of course it is, but the ship could have been could have been prepared a month ago, not a week ago. And the reality is that's exposed our military families in Akrotiri and Dikalia, and it's exposed our allies all the way from Kuwait down to Oman. In fact, in some cases, it's exposed Turkey and Azerbaijan as well, although they're more capable of their own responses. So I think that's a real problem. But no, I don't think we should be involved in striking targets in Iran. I don't think that's either necessary or wise. I mean, what we should be doing is making sure that we are capable of supporting our own defences, and that's something we're short of.
And the longer this goes on, the greater the degree to which we are likely to be dragged into it, aren't we?
Well, I hope not, and that's where I think the Prime Minister's got to offer both the leadership and the political judgment to make sure we maintain our essential alliance with the United States. And I'm afraid, for whatever people think, it is non-discretionary. We are very, very reliant on the United States for our own security, not just in terms of military, but in terms of counterterrorism protection at home, in terms of serious and organised crime and other things like that. So our intelligence cooperation must be maintained. And that's why I'm afraid it's not, in a way, it's not just the action that Keir Starmer's got to think about. And in that, he's right that we shouldn't be engaged in the weaponry and so on. It's the politics. And, he's a politician. That is literally what he's hired to do, is to get the politics of international relations right. What he should have been able to say was that the United States was free to use their bases. After all, they have a perfectly respectable position that this is self-defense. But that doesn't mean that it's wise for the United Kingdom to be involved. And had he done that, he'd have allowed the Americans to get on with what they wanted to do and provided the political reassurance that we are still close allies.
Yeah, indeed. Tom Tugendhat, a former Security Minister, thanks ever so much for joining me today. Sorry about the delay on the line. Tom was talking to us from Delhi, but thanks very much, Tom.